My parents forced me to quit college to pay my brother's fees. Now they're broke, and I'm the one deciding whether they eat or starve. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I was supposed to be the first in my family to graduate college. I still remember the day I got my acceptance letter. My mom cried. My dad patted my back, and for once, I felt like I wasn't the disappointment. Growing up, we didn't have much. My parents worked factory jobs, and every conversation about the future ended with one phrase: education is your way out. So when I got that letter, I thought it meant freedom. For a few weeks, the house was full of laughter and pride. My dad even told the neighbors, "My son's going to make something of himself." But that celebration didn't last long. A month later, my younger brother, Ryan, failed his entrance exams. He'd been lazy in high school, skipping classes, hanging out with friends, saying things like grades don't define me. Still, my parents refused to believe he could fail at anything. The shift was slow at first. My mom stopped asking about my dorm arrangements and started worrying about Ryan's self-esteem. My dad began saying things like, "Family supports each other, right?" Then one night, over dinner, my mom said it outright. "We can't afford both of you in college. Ryan needs a second chance. You can take a break for now." A break. That's what they called it. I tried to protest, tried to explain that scholarships only last so long, that I'd worked for this. But my father's tone went cold. "You're the older one. You should understand responsibility." A week later, I got the call from the college. My tuition hadn't been paid. The funds were redirected to cover Ryan's private enrollment. I sat on my bed that night, staring at my acceptance letter, realizing my dream wasn't lost to poverty. It was stolen by blood. After dropping out, I told myself it would just be temporary, a year, maybe two. I found a job at a local warehouse stacking boxes and loading trucks, just until things got better. Every morning started before sunrise, my hands blistered and back aching. But I kept repeating my father's words: family sacrifices for family. I wanted to believe it meant something. At first, I sent most of my paycheck home. My parents said they needed help with Ryan's living expenses, but soon it became a routine they'd call every week, guilt dripping from every word. "You know your brother's studying hard," my mom would say. "He can't focus if we're worrying about bills." I never heard a thank you. Just expectations. Meanwhile, Ryan's social media painted a different story. Expensive clothes. New phone. Nights out with friends. He looked happy, carefree. Once, I commented, "Glad you're doing well." He replied with a smirking emoji and deleted my comment. I tried to talk to my parents about it, but my father cut me off. "Don't start drama. Ryan's under pressure. Be supportive." I wanted to scream, to tell them that I was the one breaking my back while he played college prince. But I didn't. Instead, I worked longer hours, sometimes pulling double shifts, just to make sure rent and their bills were covered. The worst part wasn't the exhaustion, it was the invisibility. When I came home after a 14-hour day, no one asked how I was. My mom would be on the phone with Ryan, my dad watching TV, both smiling like everything was fine. I'd sit there quietly, realizing I wasn't their son anymore. I was their provider, and yet a part of me still hoped they'd see what I was doing. Before I ran out of pieces to give, by the second year, I stopped pretending that things would change. My parents had started talking about Ryan like he was the family's savior. "Once Ryan graduates, we'll finally be stable," my dad would say. I'd nod silently, swallowing the resentment that burned in my chest. Every paycheck I earned was split, part for bills, part for Ryan's needs, and whatever was left, I saved in an envelope under my mattress. I called it my someday fund. Someday, I'd go back to college. Someday, I'd live for myself again. But every time I mentioned that dream, the guilt-tripping began. "Why are you being selfish?" My mother would snap. Your brother still needs you, my father would add. I learned quickly that in our house, my sacrifices weren't love, they were obligations. One night, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. My mom whispered, "He doesn't have the brains, Ryan does. He should just be grateful he's helping." The words hit harder than any insult I'd ever heard. I went back to my room and sat in the dark, hands shaking, wondering if I'd been blind my whole life. Ryan, on the other hand, barely called anymore. When he did, it was always for money. "Bro, can you send $200 more? I need books." Books, right? I sent it anyway, hoping maybe he'd see me as more than his wallet. But when I saw him post pictures from a music festival the next day, laughing with his girlfriend, I realized the truth. My family's loyalty wasn't love. It was convenience. Still, I told myself to keep going. Maybe, just maybe, this was what being the good son meant. But deep down, a voice was whispering something darker. They'll never choose you. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. I was sorting through some old papers, looking for my birth certificate to renew my ID. That's when I found it. A folder marked Education Fund. I remembered it vaguely. My parents had opened it when I was in high school, saying it was for my future. My hands trembled as I flipped through the documents. The account was in my name, or at least it had been. The balance was zero. Every cent had been withdrawn and transferred over 2 years ago. The same period Ryan started attending his private college. When I confronted my father, he barely looked up from his newspaper. "Dad, you used my education fund for Ryan." He sighed, annoyed. "It's all family money. What's yours is ours." I could barely speak. "You said that was my college fund." He slammed the paper down. "And what's your problem? You've got a job. You're helping your brother. You should be proud." Proud, that word twisted something inside me. My mom joined in, her voice sharp. "Ryan's future benefits all of us. Don't start this again." Walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. Outside, the sky looked heavy, like it knew something I didn't. I sat on the porch steps, clutching the folder. The cold wind stung my face, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. That night, I opened a new bank account under my own name. No shared access, no family ties. I decided to start saving again. But this time, not for anyone else. Still, as I watched Ryan's car pull into the driveway later that night, shiny, expensive, probably bought with my sacrifices, I realized something I'd been avoiding for years. My parents never planned for my future. I was just a stepping stone for his. A few months later, I got a call from one of Ryan's old classmates. We hadn't spoken in years, so I was surprised when he asked, "Hey man, is Ryan doing okay? Haven't seen him around campus lately?" I froze. "What do you mean?" "He's supposed to be finishing his last semester." The guy laughed awkwardly. "Last semester? Dude, Ryan dropped out months ago. Said he got a business opportunity." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying every lie every time Ryan said he needed money for books, projects, or field trips. The next morning, I decided to drive to the college myself. The administrator looked at me with confusion. "Ryan Mitchell. He hasn't been enrolled since January." I remember walking out of that office feeling hollow, like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. The betrayal wasn't just his, it was my parents' blind faith. When I got home, Ryan was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Where's the business opportunity?" I asked quietly. He looked up, smirking. "Oh, that." He leaned back, unfazed. "You wouldn't get it. You've always been the worker, not the thinker." Something in me snapped. "You lied to everyone. You took my future, my money." He cut me off, laughing. "Relax, man. It's not like you were going anywhere. I turned to my parents for support, but my mom jumped in before I could continue. "Stop attacking your brother. He's just trying to find himself." My father glared at me. "You're jealous, aren't you? Ryan's doing something with his life, and you can't stand it." I looked at all three of them, realizing I was standing in a house full of strangers. For the first time, I didn't feel like their son. I felt like their scapegoat, and deep down, I knew something inside me had finally broken. The fight that ended everything started over dinner. My mom served food like nothing was wrong, chatting about Ryan's new business idea, some vague startup he couldn't even explain. I sat there silent until my father looked up and said, "You should be more supportive, son. He's trying to build something for the family." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I finally saw the insanity of it all. He's not building anything. He's burning everything I ever worked for. My father's fork hit the table. "Watch your mouth." "No," I said, standing up. "I've watched my whole life disappear so you could keep pretending he's special. You took my education, my money, my future, and for what? A liar who won't even finish what I started." My mom's voice shook. "You're being cruel. Cruel." I snapped. "You made me drop out of college to pay for him. You made me your servant." Ryan finally spoke, his tone mocking. "You've done throwing your pity party?" That's when my father stood and shouted, "Get out." At first, I thought he meant from the table. But his voice didn't soften. "Pack your things. If you can't respect this family, you don't belong in it." I looked at my mom, waiting for her to say something, anything. But she just stared down at her plate. Ryan smirked. I felt the last thread holding me to that house snap. That night, I packed everything I owned into a single duffel bag. A few clothes, some old photos, and the envelope of savings I'd hidden. I slept in my car behind the warehouse for weeks, engine off to save gas, waking up shivering before dawn to start my shift. Each night, I'd stare at the ceiling of that cramped car, realizing I hadn't just lost my home. I'd lost the illusion that family meant love. The first few months were brutal. I lived off cheap coffee and instant noodles, showered at the warehouse, and pretended everything was fine when my coworkers asked how I was doing. But deep down, I was running on fumes emotionally and financially. Still, something in me refused to quit. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the quiet rage that came from losing everything. Either way, I decided if I was going to rebuild, it would be for me this time. I started picking up every extra shift I could get. When my supervisor noticed my consistency, he offered me a position in logistics, better hours, better pay. For the first time in years, I said yes to something that wasn't about my family. I rented a small studio apartment, one room, peeling walls, but it was mine. No guilt, no control, no manipulation. Every night, I studied. Online courses, tutorials, anything that could get me closer to a degree. I'd sit at my tiny desk, the sound of trucks outside, my fingers typing through exhaustion. And for the first time, I felt free. A year later, I had saved enough to enroll in night classes. It wasn't the same university I dreamed of, but it was my choice. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Ryan, but word travels fast in families like ours. One night, my aunt called. "Your mom mentioned you're studying again," she said softly. "She's proud of you." I didn't respond. Because I knew it wasn't pride, it was guilt wrapped in silence. Then, almost poetically, I heard the first cracks in their perfect world. Ryan had dropped out officially this time. Their money was gone. The calls started again. First subtle, then desperate. But this time, I didn't answer. Not yet. 2 years passed before I heard my parents' voices again. By then, I had finished my logistics certification, landed a stable job at a shipping firm, and finally moved into a small but clean apartment. Life was quiet, peaceful in a way I'd never known. But peace doesn't last long when ghosts still have your number. It started with a voicemail from my mother. "Sweetheart, can you call us back? It's important." Her voice was trembling, like she'd been crying. I hesitated for days before finally calling. My father answered instead. His tone was softer than I remembered. "Ryan's business didn't work out," he said slowly. "We took out some loans for him. Things got complicated." Complicated. That word carried the weight of years of denial. I didn't say anything. He continued, "We're a little behind on payments. The house we could use some help." For a moment, I almost laughed. The same man who told me to get out was now asking for help to stay in. I asked, "Where's Ryan?" My mother took the phone. "He's been struggling, honey. People cheated him. He's living with a friend." I knew that tone, the same one she used when lying to herself. But I didn't argue. Instead, I said, "I'll think about it." A week later, I drove past their old house. The lawn was overgrown, paint peeling, mailbox stuffed with unpaid bills. It looked defeated. I sat there for a long time, watching from the car, remembering every night I'd spent outside this same house, wondering why love had to hurt. Then I saw a figure step onto the porch. Ryan. He looked thinner, tired, a shadow of his arrogance. He lit a cigarette, staring blankly into the distance. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt distance. Karma hadn't just knocked. It had moved in. A few days later, I got the inevitable call. My mother's voice cracked through the line, trembling like a child's. "Please, can you come over? We just need to talk." I almost said no. But something in her tone, desperation mixed with denial, made me curious. I agreed. When I pulled up to the house, I barely recognized it. The porch sagged, the once white walls now a dull gray. My father sat on the couch, surrounded by unopened bills, his shoulders slumped. Ryan was there too, hunched over, staring at his phone, pretending I didn't exist. The air felt thick with shame. My mother forced a smile. "You look good," she said. "We're so proud of you." I ignored the small talk. "What's going on?" My father finally spoke. "We're behind on the mortgage. If we can't pay within the month, we'll lose the house." His voice broke on the last word. "We just need a little help, son. You're doing well now, right?" I looked at Ryan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked, "What happened to the money?" He muttered, "It's gone." Things didn't work out. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, taking in the sight of the people who had once thrown me out like I was nothing. For years, I had begged for their approval, their affection, and now they were begging for my mercy. My father's voice trembled. "You're our family. You won't let us suffer, right?" I looked him dead in the eye and said quietly, "Family sacrifices for family. Isn't that what you taught me?" The words hung in the air like a mirror they didn't want to face. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the powerless one anymore, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be their savior or their lesson. That night, couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene in my head. My father's trembling hands, my mother's tearful eyes, Ryan's silence. Part of me wanted to help. That same obedient part that once believed love meant self-destruction. But another part, the one that had slept in a freezing car, the one that rebuilt his life alone, whispered, "They chose this." I sat on my balcony. City lights flickering below, the hum of traffic mixing with my thoughts. For years, I begged for scraps of love. Now, I held the power they used to control me with money, stability, choice. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. The next day, I visited them again. My mother hugged me, crying harder this time. "We're so sorry, sweetheart. We didn't mean for things to end up like this." I stayed still, letting her words sink in. "You didn't mean it," I said quietly. "You meant every decision when it benefited Ryan." My father looked away, jaw tight. "We did what we thought was right." I nodded slowly. "No, you did what was easy." Ryan finally spoke, voice small. "You don't have to rub it in. We get it." I turned to him, my voice cold. "Do you?" "Because I don't think you've ever understood what responsibility feels like." The room went silent. I placed a folded piece of paper on the table, a check that could cover 1 month's payments. "That's for food and medicine," I said. "Not for saving the house. Consider it a reminder." My father stared at it like it was both a blessing and an insult. My mother whispered, "You're leaving?" I met her eyes. I did that years ago, when I walked out. The air felt lighter, not because I'd forgiven them, but because I no longer needed Toy, thought walking away would feel simple. But something inside me needed to say the words I'd swallowed for years. So a week later, I went back, not to help, but to end it properly. They were sitting in the same living room, the walls covered with unpaid bills instead of family photos. My father looked up nervously when I entered. My mother started crying the second she saw me. Ryan barely lifted his head. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. My voice was calm, sharp, and deliberate. "You taught me that family sacrifices for family. So tell me, when did that rule stop applying to you?" My father opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "You took my education fund, my savings, and my future, and when I questioned it, you threw me out." My mother sobbed. "We thought we were doing what's best." I cut her off softly. "No, Mom, you were doing what was easiest. You just didn't expect me to survive it." Then I turned to Ryan. His arrogance was gone, replaced by something hollow. "You stole from me and laughed while I slept in my car. You don't owe me money. You owe me years I can't get back." He stared at the floor. "I messed up." "Yeah," I said. "You did? And now you get to live with that." I pulled a small envelope from my pocket and placed it on the table. Not a check this time. Just a note that said, "Family sacrifices for family. I already paid my share." They didn't speak. The silence in that house was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. As I turned to leave, my father whispered, "Do you hate us?" I paused at the door. No, I just finally love myself more. It's been 3 years since that day, and I haven't been back to that house since. Sometimes I drive past it on my way to work. It's smaller now, not physically, but in the way memories shrink once you stop feeding them. The paint's faded, the yard's dead, and the new owners have replaced the old mailbox that once held all my college acceptance letters and unpaid bills. It doesn't hurt to see it anymore. It just reminds me of everything I survived. I live in a quiet apartment overlooking the city. My degree hangs framed above my desk, not because it defines me, but because it reminds me what persistence looks like. Every morning I make coffee, open my window, and breathe in the kind of peace I used to think only other people deserved. My parents still try to reach out once in a while. Short, polite texts, "We hope you're doing well." I don't ignore them, but I don't engage either. Some wounds aren't meant to be reopened just because the bleeding stopped. As for Ryan, I heard he's working part-time at a local store, barely getting by. There's no satisfaction in that, just a quiet sense of balance. People say forgiveness is freedom, but I've learned that sometimes distance is. I didn't need to forgive them to move on. I just needed to stop waiting for them to see my worth. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: love isn't proven through suffering. Family isn't built on obligation. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for yourself is walk away, not in anger, but in peace. Because when they taught me sacrifice, They never realized what I truly learned from it, how to finally choose myself.